first screenings that we've had, so it really means a lot that you came out and watched the film. I'm the director, by the way, Amanda Lukoff. So I'm going to introduce everyone, and I'm gonna ask the panel a couple questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So this guy right next to me, if you don't remember from the film, this is Frank Stevens. He's an actor and an author and an advocate, and he's going to say a few words in a moment. I'd also like to introduce Luke Gonzalez and Carter King. They're a local Special Olympics unified sports pair, so happy to have Texas represented. Thank you guys for coming. And in the back, we've got Soren Colombo, who's the Senior Director of Global Youth Engagement with Special Olympics. And little shout out, he's got a talk tomorrow, Wednesday at 3:30, the Unified Generation, Youth and Social Inclusion, so go check him out. And then Tim Shriver is in the building, the chairman of the Board of Special Olympics. And 2 o'clock, he's got a talk today, a unified perspective, so definitely check that out too. So honored to have all of you guys here. So Soren, first question. So like the siblings in the film, you also have a sibling with an intellectual disability who inspired you to put your love and pride into action. Can you tell us a little bit about why you and Timbo created Spread the Word, how the campaign has evolved over the last 10 years, and why you've broadened the campaign beyond the R word?
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. And having sat and watched that film, I think one of the things that comes out most strikingly is you start watching it and you think you're going to watch a film or a story about a word, and you see pretty quickly that it's a story about people, and it's about brothers and sisters and friends and teachers and classmates who are living through a human experience of how we treat each other and how we include each other, don't include each other, how we build each other up, tear each other down, but ultimately it's an extremely human story. We use letters and syllables and words to communicate very human things to each other. And I think that when you really see the story of siblings there, that comes home maybe even stronger, because many of us know the very human story of having a sibling, a brother or sister, and watching them succeed and fail and be built up, be torn down. So my experience, I have a younger sister with an intellectual developmental disability. And growing up, I was sort of in the front row seat to seeing how people did or didn't include her, how she could make friends, couldn't make friends, how people, you go to a grocery store, starting walking down the aisle, someone at the other end turns around and walks the other way because they see my younger sister, Olivia. Not being able to be seated at restaurants because people don't want to have someone with autism sitting next to them. These are pretty common experiences, I think, for a family dealing with intellectual and developmental disability. Every story, humanly unique and humanly different. So as someone who was a big brother, my goal in life was to make the world better for her to live in. And ultimately, I quickly found how much of a shared experience that was, so making the world better for the 200 million people around the world who also have an intellectual developmental disability. And what we found, again, it's difficult for everyone to write a law. It's difficult for every person out there to start a new organization or to raise a bunch of money or this or that. But we thought that we as young people could ask others to reflect on the language that they use and the power of it. And again, how the language we use affects other people's human stories. And you listen to Frank and you listen to other people in this film and you see the impact that our words have. And you have to ask yourself, are we comfortable with having that impact on other people? Are we comfortable having that tear down effect on other people? And if we're not, then we should just change the language that we use, and ultimately that should lead to changing behaviors that we have and structures that we have. So Timbo and I started the Spread the Word, End the Word campaign about 10 years ago, and it was that very simple call to action. Reflect on the power that your words have, and if you are comfortable with that destructive power being used against people, and you're comfortable with that hurt and pain being communicated in the words that you use, then fine, go on ahead. If you don't feel comfortable with that, then join with us, reflect on that, and help us change the world to be a more inclusive place for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And as you can see, the R word, continues to be an issue. I don't know, if we took a show of hands, I'm sure everyone in here would say that they've heard it, that they've seen it, they've heard it used in a destructive way. But it also speaks to this much broader human experience and human endeavor that we're on to try to make the world a more inclusive place. So over the last 10 years, we've had this campaign. We've had over 1 million people have subscribed to it, have joined in support of it. We've been in thousands of schools here in the United States, around the world, hundreds of college campuses in the United States and around the world. And what we've heard, even especially recently, has been, let's take this on to be an even broader campaign and to embrace the fact that what we've been doing for the past 10 years has been about creating a more inclusive world. So we've actually just this year have grown our campaign to not only be spread the word and the word, but actually spread the word for inclusion. And to ask people not only just to consider the words that they use, but to take a very active commitment to an act of inclusion. So you'll actually see as we wrap up in a little while, you'll see one of our banners around here. And I encourage you to think whether you have a chance to sign our banner or a chance to go to our website, to reflect on what your one act of inclusion could be. Is there someone in your school who sits alone at lunch? Is there someone in your workplace who's not welcomed? To take a single act of inclusion on, and to encourage other people to do the same. So as we move forward, taking the lessons that we've learned on our language and translating that also into the actions, behaviors that we have to create, again, a very human story, but one that's all about inclusion.
Thank you. Okay, I skipped over you by accident. Do you want to hold this? I'll hold this for you. All right.
Okay, good afternoon. We are so proud to be a part of South by Southwest EDU. EDU is to the South by Southwest festivals like the red carpet is to the Oscars. Everybody here at EDU is well dressed, clear-headed, and full of anticipation. At the festivals next week, everyone is half-dressed, fuzzy-headed, and full of beer. I want to thank the organizers for having me lead off our discussion with some prepared remarks. I know they are mindful of the fact that some of us up here find the Q&A format a little too fast-paced and confusing, but honestly, I told them not to worry. I am ready to jump in if Tim gets stumped. Seriously, the Q&A sessions are a little harder for those of us with ID. We just need a little more time to process both the questions and our answers. I am not kidding. Last week I got a question from a law student that must have included 6 question marks and 4 footnotes. Luckily, it wasn't my first rodeo. So I just looked at him and said, could you repeat the question, please? By the time he finished, our time was up. I hope you enjoyed this film as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. Honestly, I wish I could say that the film was no longer necessary. But I cannot. Racial, ethnic, and personal slurs take a lot of killing. I first addressed the pain the R word causes in 2006 when Rush Limbaugh and Rahm Emanuel both used it in the same week. Then in 2008, when it was a part of a catchphrase for Ben Stiller's movie Tropic Thunder. Then again in 2012 when Ann Coulter used it. And here we are today. I'm a little exasperated that it won't just die. In fact, a couple of years ago, I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post where I said, I feel like Professor Van Helsing, or maybe Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I keep trying to kill this thing, and it just won't die. As I said then, we are going to keep trying, but instead of a stake, we will just keep driving to drive a smile into your hearts. Thank you. Now, I think we are going to turn to the panel. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Frank. All right, Tim. Don't get stumped. As I'm sure everyone here is aware, Special Olympics is the preeminent advocacy organization for the disability community with a massive global footprint. And most of the participants in the film are Special Olympics athletes or global ambassadors or work in the organization. So in honor of Special Olympics' 50th anniversary, you launched a campaign focused on inspiring action and ending discrimination for people with intellectual disabilities. Can you tell us more about why the revolution is inclusion and about the power of unified sports, schools, and communities?
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Congratulations. Can we give a big round of applause for this woman had to work hard. And when we think about pioneers and revolutionaries and innovators and people who won't be stopped, you just saw the evidence of a woman who refused to be denied the chance to tell this story. So huge shout out to you, Amanda. Frank, your comments were fair. Yeah, just calm down. Don't worry. I know you have something coming back, but congratulations, both on screen and before. And Soren, as usual, spoke beautifully, but made one major omission, which is he didn't welcome his new son, Milo, to the Special Olympics family here with his wife, Jennifer. So let's give it up for Milo, the newest advocate for inclusion. And thanks for making his first trip here to the red carpet. I'll just make two very quick comments. First, we're here for an education conference. I would venture to say that there's not an educator or a support person in the education system who doesn't recognize the importance of overcoming fear, intolerance, stigma, bullying, cliques, all the various manifestations of exclusion and labeling and stigma that exist in our young people. And I think we frequently believe that we need curricula, which we do, and we need new programs like restorative practices, which we do, and we need to teach social and emotional competence, which we do. And we need to teach relationship skills and listening and respect and dignity, and we're beginning to do all those things. What I think we don't always remember is who the best teachers are. And this film is a story of teachers, not just victims, not primarily people who have been abused or victimized, although many have. It's not primarily a story, in my view, about stigma and its negative effects. That, in a way, is the easy story to tell. The much more subtle and powerful story that I saw in the film is the story of teachers. It's the story of people like Frank and David and Jason and your sister Amanda and all these, coming, as you just said in your remarks, Frank, with a hugely transformative power as teachers. So let's just think for a moment about all the ways, many of the stories in this film are about siblings, which if you think about it, Amanda, at least, and Soren, who are up here now, had the great benefit of having teachers of these lessons of human dignity and beauty throughout their childhood, right? So they were able to grow up seeing beauty and dignity in a different form than the way in which society saw it. And so they were, in some ways, imprinted with a powerful lesson that they will have for the rest of their lives. My mother was a sibling. In my family, people are better known than my mother. People think of President Kennedy. He was a sibling. He grew up, as did his brothers and sisters, having to learn the lesson that human dignity and beauty and goodness don't come in conventional packages all the time. And that to the extent we learn from them, not just give to them, we begin to create the kind of culture, the kind of belonging, the kind of systems, the kind of schools, the kind of education, the kind of communities we're looking for. My main point would be the country is being torn apart by divisiveness and anxiety and intolerance on all sides, and we have standing right in front of you the teachers of the opposite lesson. And if we want to think about what we can all do in addition to changing our language, we can put back into our schools the core lessons around inclusivity. We can make every school have, if you got a boys team that plays basketball and a girls team that plays basketball, why shouldn't every American high school have a unified sports team that plays basketball, wears the school colors, competes in interscholastic sports, gets cheered at pep rallies, gets written up in newspapers, where the athletes can be lionized and respected because they're athletes, and because they represent their school, and because they're amongst the best champions in the building. That would be kind of like a civil rights movement from the bottom up, based in schools, led by young people themselves, using the power of play and sport to teach the powerful lessons of inclusion and human dignity. So we see a movie, it's the R word. Soren, I think, has quite brilliantly shifted our focus from simply talking about the word to talking about its counterforce, inclusion. We're educators here. I hope you'll all go out and ask. If you get into panels, here would be my big request. Don't just change your language. My guess is we're talking to the converted here. But when you get into these panels and you hear the speakers, raise your hand and ask, what are you doing? What is your program doing? What is your school doing? What are your policies doing to unlock the gifts of people with intellectual differences as teachers in your school? What are you doing not to help them, support them, IEP them, place them, but to unlock their gifts? And if they don't have an answer, tell them to call Soren and Leah and the whole team at the Unified Champion Schools in our office, who are preparing a worldwide campaign, in fact are underway with a worldwide campaign to make every school in the world a place where a child with an intellectual disability has a chance not just to be included, but to have prominence, relevance, and importance as a teacher of the most important lesson the world needs today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Luke and Carter. So similar to the experience of the campers and counselors with Camp PALS that we saw in the film, Special Olympics Unified Sports Experience also provides an opportunity to develop meaningful relationships between teammates and unified pairs. So can you tell us about your experience participating in unified sports, as well as the bond you created as a result, and maybe what's the best part of being a unified pair?
So in Unified, I bond with my friends. Like I have Carter here. He's my best friend in the beginning of the year. Unified Sports is a pair to represent our school and each sport, like unified basketball, unified track. In each sport, we create how much love we had in the students. Like I'm a freshman. I feel I belong in Unified Champions. Unified is the best class I've ever been on. I have great bonding with my friends. I'm a great, notable person.
So for me, being a part of Unified Champions is something very unique for me and something I've never experienced before in other schools or wherever I may have gone before. For me, it's really unique because it's really the only place in school that you see kids from different backgrounds, no matter where it may be. They're gathering together to not only pour into each other, pour their hearts out into each other, but into their sport, something that they really feel passionate about. And I think for me, that is the best part of being on a unified team, is that whether it be in your school sport or your club sport, it's really hard to find those people that they have that such a strong relationship together and they compete alongside each other. It's really hard to find that, but in unified sports, I get to compete with some of my very best friends. Every day we get out there and we practice together and we work hard together, and we're all just working toward one goal, which is we want to win, and doing that together makes that win or whatever it may be so much sweeter than it was before.
Beautiful. Perfect.
Thank you. All right, we have 2 more questions, then we're going to open it up to you guys. So this is for Soren or Tim or Tim. One of the greatest challenges I had making this film was finding more diverse voices, specifically with the sibling stories, as they were overwhelmingly from white middle-class families, including my own. So historically, we know that marginalized communities, including people of color and people with disabilities, face disparities with access to things like education, healthcare, employment, resources, and representation. Does Special Olympics USA face similar challenges with diverse athlete, family, and school engagement? And what steps have you taken or are you taking to help break down these barriers?
Yeah, so it's a really important question. The answer is yes. I'm not going to stand up here and lie and say that we don't have problems of access to underrepresented populations. We're not as strong as we should be in urban centers. We're not as strong as we should be in Native communities. We're not as strong as we should be in Latino communities. We're not as representative as we should be with respect to our staffs. We're a movement that grew up in a volunteer culture, which typically in the old model of a certain kind of volunteer culture was suburban oriented, the old station wagon, minivan culture. That doesn't mean there wasn't a huge amount of volunteerism and citizen action and citizen engagement in the urban core and in all these different populations. But our movement did not find itself immediately in those kinds of communities. We have worked hard on it. We do have a specialized focus on urban unified champion schools, but the culture works against us, honestly, and we have to work hard and we have to do better. When you think about, as Loretta said in this, being a person of color, being a woman, being a person with an intellectual disability, you go down the list. I mean, these are Americans who, through no fault of their own, are doubly, triply, quadruply marginalized. Through no fault of their own. Not one of those characteristics was anything that anybody did wrong. Okay? So we have a special responsibility, since we are a movement about people who have been othered, to take very seriously the subtle and institutional ways in which othering exists in our own culture and in the culture around us. And so we have to do better. I think, when you go back to the early days of the Special Olympics movement, the 50s and 60s, even in my own house where my mother started summer camp, it was very diverse, funnily enough. It was easier in those days, and it was only easier, though, because people were institutionalized, and they were institutionalized in there was seemingly very little discrimination in the institutionalization, shockingly enough. So today, as the country has become more and more divided in some ways, we have to work harder, and we will, and we will continue to represent the idea that inclusion means inclusion. And if we think that our athletes are teachers, they're not just teachers for people of one color or one economic background or one racial or, we have to be, if we preach inclusion, we got to mean it. So we need to challenge ourselves just as much as we challenge others, and we need to do better, honestly.
Thank you.
I agree with Tim, and I am excited about the increased focus that we're putting on our urban Unified Champion Schools programming. I think that's going to be a very important step for us. I do think that we need to do better. There's something very unique about disability in that it is agnostic to almost any other differentiator that we use as human beings. disability does not cater to a particular race, does not cater to a particular gender identity or sexual orientation or religion or creed. And we, I think, are embracing that more and more and taking that very, very seriously. We sit in a unique position working with the disability community to be sitting at that vantage, that we have an intervention, we have a set of programming that can apply equally across all of those different traits and all of those different differentiators that we use. So we, I think, have a maybe an even more serious responsibility than other organizations and other community action organizations. So we, I think, are going to take that even more to heart. I think that looking at a film like this, you do see that it is a lot of white middle class faces, but it doesn't need to be. To give just a quick piece of context for some of our work outside the United States, I mean, I just last week was in a very poor community outside of Mombasa in Kenya, where we're doing unified sports and unified champion schools work in a very, very rural, very, very poor environment. Have done this work in the slums of Bhubaneswar in eastern India. We work with hundreds of thousands of schools around the world to do this. So it's not something that can't be done in challenging environments, whether it's economically, socially, politically. This can be done anywhere. We just need to, I think, continue to amass the cultural will, the political will to be able to make it happen. And I think that this is now more than ever the time to make that commitment for it. So good question. I think we're going to continue to do better at it.
Thank you. All right, last question for the panel from me, and then love for you guys to ask questions or comments. So when all of these dynamic educators leave the screening today, we want them to feel empowered to take the film's message of respect and inclusion back home with them. So what are some actionable steps they can take back to their classrooms and communities to help foster and promote respect and inclusion?
Let the young people start on that one.
So I think Coach Foster is the best coach I had in the beginning of the year. I think that he really helped me about my behavior because I have problems, because I get violent sometimes. Every time when I get violent, when I get angry, I try to punch my punching bag and I do a lot of stuff. And Coach Foster is the best coach. He helps me from right from wrong. He's the best coach. I give him hugs every morning, every day. Unified Champions. Coach Foster has been a role model to me. I think that he's been a really good coach, and I never made this so far. He's the best thing when I reach my senior year. Once I graduate, I always remember Coach Foster down in my memories.
Just a little background. Coach Foster is our Unified Champion sponsor at Dripping Springs High School. Really, truly is a great guy. Unfortunately, he's moving, but we'll always remember him. He was like a second dad to me, so we'll definitely miss him. As some steps from a student perspective that I think educators can take is to, number one, overemphasize the importance of respect to your students or in the workplace, wherever your circle of influence may be. Overemphasize the significance of respect and the uniqueness of each individual person, because no matter who it may be, everybody has something different, something unique about them, and to overemphasize them showing that is, I think, extremely important. For educators, I think another thing that's significant is to entrust your students with a little bit of the authority of the class. Allow them to kind of run it and build it the way they want it to run. And I understand that can be hard at times, but as students living in this world and being a part of the inclusion movement, starting from the bottom up, that's where it's going to start. And I think allowing them to run the class how they want it to be and putting in some things they want it to be will get better buy-in from the school and other students and filter out into the community, as well as making change from the bottom up.
As awful as the R word is, please remember to treat the people who use it with kindness, not anger. As long as, in the long run, I believe in the power of kindness to triumph over anger and hatred. Most of the people who use the R word today are not do not mean to hurt people like me. They need to know. However, that they do.
Well said, all three of you. In terms of things that I think that teachers can do, one is, or educators and other school staff. One is, I think, one of the things that I've heard, even just right now, is that inclusion, facing difference, overcoming a fear of difference, embracing difference, inclusion is a skill that we develop. It's a skill that we need practice at. It's a skill that we need structure to develop. It's a skill that we need encouragement and guidance and opportunity to develop. And so I think that when we think of how teachers can be supportive of it, it's providing that structure and opportunities to allow students to face difference, meet it in a positive way, and encourage the development of the skill of inclusion. And it can be as simple as playing sports together. It can be as simple as having a friendship club. It can be as simple as being in class together. But one of the things that I've learned, and I imagine anyone who's reflecting on the last 50, 100 years has learned, is that it really doesn't happen by accident. It's simple, but it doesn't happen by accident. Students and young people need some structure to be able to learn and develop that skill. When it's there, then, to exactly your point, the young people can teach it to each other, they can learn it from each other, and they can develop it as a group. So I think really embracing the idea that inclusion is a skill, and that's one other lesson that teachers should be creating an environment to learn is, I think, an important thing to take away.
Well, I just add wearing my teacher hat. I agree with all these points, but I do think we need a strategy. Don't try to one-off. I think what you're saying about your coach, what's his name again, Coach?
Foster.
Coach Foster. So in every school we find where this work is done well, there's one person. And in every school district where it's done well, there's one person. And the reason that one person is important is not because they're just a gladiator and a fantastic teacher or a coach or whatever, but because they help make the commitment systemic. So you can't just do a club. You have to do the club, you have to have the team, you have to have school-wide activities, and you have to have it integrated into classrooms. Then you get the effect. And building that out of a platform, whether your school or school district uses social emotional learning or expeditionary learning or deeper learning, there's lots of these movements, personalized learning, that are, schools are adopting strategies around them. Insert, as Soren says, the teaching of inclusivity into that, empower young people to lead it in their schools, build the teams, empower individuals within the teams, and keep Frank's lesson in mind. Which is why I just think we have such a rare and powerful differentiator here. When people make mistakes, treat them with kindness. There's no other movement that goes like that. I'm just telling you. There's no other panel, I would venture, in the next 4 days where someone will say, when you see hate and you see division, meet it with kindness, meet it with love. That's what we unlock when we have a systemic approach to allowing people with intellectual differences, the whole range of human differences, to teach. And I don't think there's a better lesson, so thank you. And is that
Thank
it?
you. And then we're gonna open it up for everybody. Thank you guys for your beautifully worded answers. So we have a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions or comments, there's a microphone there and there's a volunteer with a microphone as well. And we also have, Soren's going to tell you about the.
Yes. So while you think of your questions, once we do wrap up the full Q&A, we'll unfurl our spread the word banner, which in the back. And there, I encourage you to not only sign your name. I do encourage you to sign your name, but also on there, put in ink, red, green, yellow, blue, whatever ink you grab, put what your commitment for inclusion is. It can be as simple as, again, sitting next to someone at lunch. It can be as complicated as completely changing my school. Whatever it is, put down your commitment for inclusion and sign your name underneath. And over the next couple of days, we'll have many, many, many more people here at the conference do the same. And we're hopeful at the end of the week, we will have not only a bunch of names on a banner, but a collection of commitments to make the world a more inclusive place. And with that, if anyone does have questions, we'll open it up.
Thank you.
It's all good.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, so I have a question for Carter and Luke. I was wondering, what does recruitment for Unified Sports look like in your school? Is there a special way that you do it, a special process? Is it just the normal process that people do as a part of a class? How has it been adopted in your school, basically?
Like in school, we usually play basketball. Because Coach Foster, he let us play basketball. Basketball helped us improve our own sports team, like unified basketball, unified track. We feel welcome when people want to do a unified sport, because I think that it would be a great idea to invent our friends to enjoy a unified sport.
So at our school, during the day, we have a class period that is called Unified Champions. And during that class, it's open to all students. You can, it's an elective, so if you choose to take that as a class, it is an elective class for you, and it takes up a class period. Outside of class, however, that is where we practice if you want to actually compete in on a unified team. So a lot of the times it ends up being our teams that are practice outside of school, our kids that come from our class. So our class is large. We probably have 40 to 50 kids in our class. And so, every day in class we practice whatever the season is. So whether that's basketball skills, bowling skills, volleyball skills, we all practice those together. And then outside of school is where we would practice as a team and develop those team skills. So I would say a lot of the recruiting comes from our class period. And really that's just kind of our small community as of right now. Coach Foster and I have had discussions, and some of the other sponsors, about what can we do to make it more school-wide, to where you don't have to be in the class to be a part of this really special thing, but we are still working on that. So I'd say the recruitment comes a lot from our class period.
Do you have a question?
Yeah,
come on.
Comment.
Oh, that's okay.
Hi, David from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hi,
So
David.
a bit of travel. But I just wanted to say how when I watched your film, it was very emotional because we're connecting with people, and that's what it's about for me. I am a school psychologist, so a lot of the identification and things like that are something that go along with my career. But what I really wanted to talk about was one of the things that I've done in my career, which really focuses on how kind of the next step. Because as Frank was talking about, we know those people and we try to embrace them with love. And what I've come through my 7 years now of working with kids is the reason these things happen is that they've been hurt. And that hurt people. And it's kind of embracing them with love. And I think your film does a really great job with that, and seeing those people and expressing the love that we have for everyone. So I just wanted to come up here and say thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, well, I just want to thank you guys again so much for coming and watching the film, and thank you all for being here and for sharing your words with us. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yes, and thank you for your comments there, and I want to thank everybody else here. This wouldn't be possible if people like me would not hear that word anymore. It's time to stop using the R word for good. That's why I have people like Amanda, her husband, Soren, my new 2 friends. And not only do I thank them, I thank my parents. And I thank all of you. And I thank Austin and the SXSW. Thank you.
Thank you guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And if you're interested on the way out, we have postcards with information about reaching out if you're interested in screening the film. So thank you.